work out how they, as specialists, could attack the airport, if you like, but from a terrorist point of view, in order to identify any weaknesses which may still have been apparent. Those specialists put a report together, talked to the authorities, actually saw their recommendations put into effect, and the role that of ourselves is, as I say, to continue the discussions and to see the quite tremendous progress that has actually been made between the time of the two visits. So if we didn't count we've done by the instruments work for us.
So you say that quite tremendous progress has.
And what is it now?
Before and after.
After what?
Before and after the visit, I assume.
After the travel advisory and
after the recommendations were put into effect.
Yeah. The problem we face in security is the problem that many managements face, and that's one of motivation of staff, if you like. If you're carrying out what becomes a routine function because nothing's happened, one has to work in order to continually ensure that the level of awareness is right, and our concern was that perhaps it was not right. The after, if you like, is the obvious enthusiasm with which the security task is currently being operated here in Athens. Now, you asked me about the travel advisory. Of course, that was not an IATA imposition. That's purely a decision of the United States government. I have been asked by your colleagues in North America and in Europe, what do I think about Athens? Should tourists come to Athens? And my answer is that at this point in time, Athens is most certainly up to international standards. And those international standards, let me hasten to say, are government-developed standards. They're developed through the International Civil Aviation Organization, of which some 150 states, governments are members. They lay down the minimum criteria. IATA, through its airlines, works to ensure that those criteria are applied. And I can say to you confidently that those standards are applied here in Athens.
Could you say?
I think by a continued program of monitoring. Your colleague just asked me, is Athens well guarded? And my response is, yes, indeed, it is. You can see that from an inspection of your own. If you visit Athens Airport, you'll notice that there are a great number of people now protecting the airport, more perhaps than you'll see in any other airport. The reason for that is some of the recommendations which have been accepted by the authorities here require time to be fully implemented, because you need to perhaps do some rearranging of your defense mechanisms, and because it takes time, on a temporary basis, use of additional manpower is being implemented in order to ensure that the standards are high. Now, you asked me, how do you ensure that it continues? Only by a great deal of hard work by the management of the people concerned, because it is a question of trying to ensure the motivation of people who hopefully will never have a successful day in their lives. You know, we don't want them, we don't want people trying to attack the airport, and consequently for an airport to have no incidents means that you've got people, intelligent people, doing jobs that, if you like, are non-productive, and that is a challenge for management in any walk of life, not just security. It's just that it's dramatic if there's a breakdown in the security area. And I believe that the international scene in general, and certainly in view of the conversation I've just been having for the last hour with my colleagues in Montreal in respect of what's happening in ICAO at the moment, I think one of the great problems facing governments around the world is that question of continually being able to motivate people and to keep standards up, because the moment your standards fall, you can be sure that any terrorist organization who is planning to attack civil aviation is going to be aware of that, and they'll strike where there is weakness. Obviously they will not pick a strong airport. Why run that sort of risk? Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Right. And did it meet yours about being guarded?
Yes, thank you.
Assumption that you made that the guns may have been taken on board of the plane through catering or cleaning services?
I didn't make an assumption. When I was asked about how could the weapons have got on board, I said that at this point in time we don't know how they got on board, and therefore when governments carry out their investigations, they have to develop a series of scenarios in order to be able to follow back any pattern of events which may have led to such a situation. What I was trying to avoid people doing is jumping to conclusions too quickly in respect of what may have happened. It doesn't help anybody to come out with an assumption if you don't have sufficient facts on which to build your case. So what I am saying is, don't take anything for granted. Work your way back. How could this have happened? In order to try and identify what was the most probable breach of security. And that's important because if there was a breach somewhere along the line, we have to identify it because it has to be stopped. John, do you have anything to add to that or on what the gentleman called an assumption?
No, indeed, what Mr. Wallis said I think is perfectly correct. Every effort should be made now to find out how this whole hijack came about, not only the weapons that got on board, also the people.
Are you carrying out an investigation on that?
No, the investigation, is, as far as I know, is carried out by the Greek authorities and probably, but I'm not sure, by the Americans, it being an American plane.
Yes.
The IATA does not carry out such an investigation.
We lend support if we're asked to by the authorities concerned, but normally the investigation is by the government responsible for the registration of the aircraft.
Did you look into this allegation that the accomplice of the hijackers had worked at Athens Airport for 1 year before this happened?
We've heard a number of reports emanating from different sources, and we clearly have asked for that to be fully investigated, and we would expect to be advised one way or the other by the competent authorities, and clearly that's something that will happen here in Athens, not in Montreal. Asking me to read the thoughts of the President of the United States of America.
Who is in hospital, I think.
Let me put it this way. On the basis of the studies which the airlines have conducted, and bear in mind, they're in the front line of this. They want their crews and their passengers and their property safe. So they're the most careful of people. And on the basis of their studies, there can be no technical reason at all for people being warned away from Athens. Now, you know, as I say, I can't read the mind of the American president, and I don't know on what basis the decision was taken initially. But I have no doubt that the US government, the Department of Transport, is certainly aware of our views in respect of Athens, and I have no doubt that the FAA themselves will be able to brief Secretary Dole initially, and she then to brief the President. And I would expect it to follow that sort of pattern. And I believe that our views, representing the industry, will be one of those pieces of information that Elizabeth Dole will collect in order to make any decisions in respect of such a recommendation. I have no doubt that the presence in Athens at this present time of the ex-president of the United States might give some confidence to United States citizens for coming here, and that too could influence the decision-making process.
There are a number of other airports in Greece.
And if you allow me to butt in, has the investigation also looked into the western airport, or is it just the eastern airport?
No, the team looked at both the east and west terminals. In respect of the other airports in Greece, no. IATA hasn't undertaken a study of those currently. Our concern has always been for Athens itself, because of the key nature of Athens as a gateway to Europe and through Europe to North America. This is why so much concentration has been given here. It is a vital valve on the artery of civil aviation. It is key. Hence, great attention has been paid to Athens in the past, just as to certain other gateway airports. You're moving out of my area of competence.
It's not your area, is it?
No, it isn't, and I would prefer, therefore, not to speak as a layman on a subject which is as key as safety. John, I don't know. Security and facilitation. Ask us any questions you like.
Can you tell us about the perimeter of the airport? Obviously, that has not been restored or improved. Does that influence your final judgment?
Yes, there have in fact been some improvements to the perimeter, and I actually saw people working on the perimeter myself.
On the fence?
On the fence you're talking about, aren't you? Thank you, John. On the fence itself, but it takes time to completely bring a perimeter fence up to the necessary standard, but you can meet that deficiency on a temporary basis by the use of the guarding capability. And John, I mean, you were there and you saw the situation when we tested it.
Yes.
You know, I don't know if you'd like to expand on that.
Well, the thing is with the perimeter, as with most areas at this airport, that at the moment they are using people to fill the gaps that were here before, because obviously and IATA, in all honesty, has told in the past, from many years back, that there are some loopholes in the security system here at Athens Airport. Those loopholes have been filled pretty adequately now, but with the only short-term thing that you have, and that is people. One of the things that we and that the Greek government and IATA completely are in agreement about is that you cannot use people indefinitely because they get bored. What you should do is get as many technical means in, and as soon as possible, to give to the people that work on the security at an airport, to give those people more more motivation and more moral raison d'être, if you know what I mean. And that is why the fence should have and does get the highest priority. A man who patrols a fence for a week doesn't mind, but if that man drives around in his car week after week past the fence with holes in it, he gets bored and demotivated. I don't say that there are holes in the fence at this moment, it's just to give you an example. I think what they are doing now, and that is indeed the only thing they could do, is put in as many capable men and women as possible to provide the security that is necessary at an international airport. On the other hand, to see to it that as soon as possible other means of security take over as far as possible.
Can you elaborate on this means
especially in regarding to the fence?
Well,
Television cameras?
no, I'm not prepared to go into that at all. No.
But is there rotation
What do you mean by rotation?
in watching the fence?
Yes. Oh, yes.
The
yes.
rotation is much faster than before.
I would say so, yes, definitely. And what is more, it doesn't have to be faster as long as it is adequately alert. And that is certainly the case at this moment. I would suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, not to test it out.
One question arises, however, because you say that it is not certain whether the weapons passed through Athens Airport. Was it a good thing in any case because security has been tightened up?
That's an interesting point, and it's a very valid point, I think. One thing we learn in the security field and in many other fields is that if you have a crisis, it's almost irrelevant how that crisis arose, so long as out of it comes some new initiative, some new strength. Was the fuss justified? It's very traumatic when an aeroplane is hijacked and when people are held hostage. Now, it was particularly so in this case because there appeared to be an open attack on the United States, and United States citizens were being held in what can only be described as hostile territory, hostile to the United States. It is quite natural, therefore, that a fuss would be made, and a fuss under these circumstances is perhaps made before all the facts are known. And it's very difficult if you've then reached a public situation to back off. It's not a question of saying one should go more slowly. It's a natural human reaction. There was a fuss. Whether that fuss was justified or not, we may never know, because we may never know how this hijacking took place. But if out of it comes a strengthening of Athens Airport and a strengthening of other airports because of what we've learned here and we can put to good use elsewhere, then that, I think, is a benefit. We'd like to know, because we'd like to make sure that it doesn't happen in that particular way again. But really, it's difficult to go much beyond that, I think.
Is there an
If you get a situation where you have a hijack in process, it becomes immediately a governmental responsibility, and more than one, because normally your aeroplane ends up in somebody else's territory. So now you have a situation where at least two governments are involved, and in the case of the TW incident, you had 4 governments involved, quite apart from any governments of any other nationalities which were on board the aeroplane. Where do we stand? The prime function of anybody in security must be to safeguard lives. We won't accept that either. But such people should be screened initially by the employers of those people, and there should indeed.
True. But I don't know for the rest. I don't want to talk down your question, but I don't think it's of importance. There is an optionality here. Some airlines use a handling company.
The changes in Athens Airport to the levels which we've been talking about and which we're happy to talk about have happened over the past few weeks. You don't take yourself out of contractual situations as quickly as that. Industry to go to single security screening.